Welcome into MMA Live Extra. I'm Phil Murphy. The man to my left needs no introduction, but he'll get one. UFC Commander-in-Chief, President Dana White. Dana, you took office of the UFC president 12, 13 years ago. We want to pick your brain for the best and worst you've seen in that time. Okay. So in that time, best walkout you've seen.
The best walkout, I don't know. I would have to say, you know, I know I always talk about Chuck Liddell, but Chuck Liddell's walkouts were awesome. I mean, when Chuck Liddell would come out, the crowd would go crazy. You know, it was those goosebump moments for fight fans.
Whose do you think was the worst?
There's been a lot of bad ones. Tom Lawler, he's a great kid. I like him. The worst walkouts ever.
This isn't your favorite fight, but in terms of individual performance, what's the best night any guys had in the cage?
God, there's been so many nights that guys have had great performances, but my fight right now, I'll go with my fight and my performance, has to be Mark Hunt, Bigfoot Silva, however long ago that was, a few months ago. Two heavyweights fighting like middleweights for 5 rounds. Definitely the best heavyweight performance I've ever seen in the UFC.
A fight that ended in a draw.
Yeah.
Dana, what's the worst scoring decision you've ever seen?
Oh, Jesus. Are you kidding me?
How much time we have left?
Yeah, exactly. The worst scoring. I've seen so many bad fights scored. Obviously, I thought Johnny Hendricks won that fight against George St. Pierre. I think Michael Bisping and Matt Hamill, a lot of people thought that was a bad one. There's been so many.
If you could make one fight ever, time not being a factor, what year a guy was at his peak not being a factor, who would face who?
God. I would like, you know the fight that I'm going back to Chuck Liddell again. The fight that I wanted to see was when Chuck Liddell was dominant, a dominant champion, and Vanderlei Silva was a dominant champion. I tried to make that fight with the Pride organization, and they were playing some games with me, but I would have loved to have done that fight, you know, in its prime. And then obviously, I gotta go to Fedor, because there's so many kooky, crazy Fedor fans out there still. You know, it would have been fun to do a Fedor fight, you know, in his prime or close to in his prime in the UFC.
At his prime, how do you think he would have fared in the UFC?
I don't know. In his prime, the UFC heavyweight division wasn't that great, so he probably would have won. Who knows what would have happened? But you know, I know a lot of fans would have wanted to see that. I know that everybody thinks that I hate Fedor and have all this whatever. I don't. I just would have liked to have seen what would have happened. His management was so difficult to work with. You couldn't get anything done.
Back to the Vanderlei-Chuck matchup. That's something that we can only see in the UFC video game, and we've seen that Bruce Lee will be a playable character in the UFC video game. How do you think he'd have held up in the octagon as a mixed martial artist?
That's interesting. You know, at that time, I mean, if you look at when Bruce Lee was alive, nobody, you know, there weren't guys that trained in everything the way that Bruce Lee did. And the guy's such a huge icon still today. I mean, he's so powerful that the kids today still know who Bruce Lee is. So, and I'm such a huge fan. Almost every fighter, if not every fighter in the UFC is a huge fan. So it was fun to get him in the game. Dana
White, always appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you.
Keep it on ESPN.com/MMA for all breaking news in the world of mixed martial arts. Dana White, I'm Phil Murphy. Thanks for watching.